Hello. So this video I might pause once in a while. It's a video called Silence and the Death of Floyd. I might pause it and put my thoughts on it, but it's by Brad Warner, who is a writer for Zazen. He has a book called Hardcore Zen that I really like. So, and what he has to say here, um, I think is very informative and gives a different perspective. Um, so I will be talking to you again soon.
Hi folks, I put up a written blog today and that's what it looks like. And I'd like to read it to you now because I know some people don't look at the written things and they just look at the videos and vice versa. So here goes. The death of George Floyd was a tragedy, as are the deaths of so many other people of color, known and unknown, at the hands of police officers who did not live up to the motto, serve and protect. Racism continues to be a serious problem in the United States in spite of the strides we've made over the years. We are right to call attention to George Floyd and all that his murder at the hands of the police represents. All of this is true. It is also true that we are in the midst of a global pandemic. We Americans have joined the rest of the world to work very hard to slow the spread of a disease that has killed over 100,000 of our citizens. All large public gatherings have been canceled so that people do not mix in close crowds and infect each other. And yet, over the weekend, millions of people who had been shouting "flatten the curve" for months were in the streets, shoulder to shoulder with each other, undoing all of that difficult effort and economic hardship. It's impossible to know yet how many people were killed over this past weekend, but it could be in the thousands, or tens of thousands, or in the millions.
The reasons he just gave before is the reasons I didn't go to the protest. There was one in Bangor, Maine, that evidently started down at the library, and then a bunch of people followed them up to the police station. There's actually a video online of the police going inside in the middle of the protest, I guess. But I also worry about this because we've been in quarantine now for a couple months. I do live with my boyfriend and his father, and I worry about what these effects of having these protests is going to have on the curve, because not everyone was wearing masks. There were some, but not a lot. Everyone was very, very close quarters to each other, yelling, which is projectiling there. So, I don't know. I just still really worry about that.
This is also a tragedy. And so, as I mourn for George Floyd and all of the other people of color killed by the police, I also mourn for the people who were killed this weekend, who are still with us today, but whose suffering will soon begin and last for several weeks before they succumb. A few of those who get sick and die will be the very same people who took to the streets, but most will not. It will be the elderly relatives and sick friends of those people, and the elderly and sick among us who chose not to attend the demonstrations even though they may have agreed with the cause. Disease does not differentiate between racists and believers in the righteous and necessary cause of anti-racism. Most of the people who took to the streets this weekend were young and strong. They will not suffer directly for their actions. If the people they infect are close to them, some few may come to an awakening in a month or so of the tragedy that they caused. Most, I'm afraid, will never understand the magnitude of the damage they have done and the suffering their actions have created. Most of us never come into direct contact with the tragedies we put into motion. This is the reason why we are told silence is assent, that if we fail to speak out about racism, we are enabling it. It is also true that if we fail to speak out about the dangers of spreading the disease that is ravaging our world, we are enabling it. This is something that the majority of the demonstrators seemed to understand until a few days ago. I'm not sure why so many among us lost our sense of responsibility and compassion. Maybe we're all stir-crazy. Maybe forcing people into isolation from each other has had effects we couldn't have anticipated. Maybe it's something to do with the American sense of individuality and personal entitlement. Maybe we're all just really bored and even another season of Tiger King couldn't have saved us. I am deeply ashamed of my country. I'm not ashamed that so many of us made our voices heard about the tragic death of George Floyd and other people of color at the hands of corrupt police officers. That's a good thing. I'm ashamed that, in highlighting the tragedy of George Floyd and racism in America, we collectively forgot our other mission to protect the elderly and weak among us from another tragedy. I have chosen, for the most part, to express my mourning over the death of George Floyd and all that his death represents in silence. And I have chosen to express my mourning over the tragedy to come in silence as well. Unfortunately, I foolishly tried to say a few things on social media over the weekend, but my mental condition was far too unstable to say anything of real value, and the forum of social media prevents that anyhow. I should have known better. I regret that I did not. I vow to be better.
I agree with the whole taking silence for George Floyd and the pandemic to come without being, sitting in meditation actually helps me reflect and think about things. That's why, if you've noticed on this channel, when I've talked about the virus, I've tried to make a spin on ways we can still be productive and do things, because this virus affects our elderly population, and I respect a lot of them, and we need to do what we need to in order to help them. But at the same time, it's not right, and I wish that things were different and I could go to some of the protests. I don't know of any others that are scheduled here in Bangor, but how the police treat people of color is just not right and needs to be, something needs to be done. And I know everyone has tried peaceful ways, and those just haven't worked. People have tried everything short of these big protests, and I just wish that it didn't have to come at the expense of the elderly.
But I also spent much of this weekend in deep silence, sitting zazen for hours each day for myself and for my country. In the silence of zazen, one can understand the deep connection between all people, all beings, and the entire universe. Silence is what unites us all. Silence is where we have all come from. Silence is where we will all end up. While we are here, it is our great task to try to make this place a little better in whatever ways we can. Merely by being alive at all, we are the cause of death and destruction. We cannot eat or live without killing. We cannot make our way in the world without causing pain and suffering. And yet many of us try to do better, to repent for the damage we cause, and to do as little damage as possible. It's wonderful that so many of us are committed to the important cause of racial justice. And yet the very concept of justice is itself something we rarely question. I wonder if a mind filled with chaos can ever understand what justice really is. I wonder if people who have never immersed themselves in silence can understand the deep connection we all share. It's not something that can be contained in a slogan or written on a placard or shared in a hashtag. This is why I chose not to participate in the chaos of the weekend, or at least I tried, even if I failed to completely stay out of it. It is vital that some of us respond to tragedy with silence. Silence is not always assent. Sometimes silence is the best thing that we can contribute. And just
I had a goodbye message in some of my other videos. I ended up accidentally deleting it. I just want to take a moment to say thank you for everyone who's watched. I personally have been making these videos for me, and doing them has kept me accountable, and I've learned so much. So if you like these, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment, tell me what you want me to do, really. I admit the coping skills ones are a little bit more for fun than for information. But I came up with this idea because of the COVID stuff going on in the world, and I realized now is the time to start taking better care of myself. Not enough people do, surprisingly, not surprisingly. But with having no classes, no job, no nothing, just sitting around, and that wasn't me. I needed something to do. So I still taking classes right now, but I've also for myself, this why I started these videos, taking care of myself in all 8 dimensions of wellness. But yeah, so if you like it, well, thank you. Subscribe, like, the spiel. Thanks for watching.